how was your interns? I think I remember you saying in your other interviews how you interned as an English teacher in Kurdistan and also working in Kibera.
Yeah.
How are those?
Yeah, so with teaching English, I taught at a very small region in Kurdistan, a very small village, and that wasn't planned. So it wasn't like I went there with an internship opportunity. I was there visiting family, and just being the kind of person I am, I like to keep busy. So I saw a problem. And that problem was that there wasn't enough teachers for the number of students that were willing to learn. They were so eager to learn. They didn't have adequate resources, but they were so motivated to learn. And so we just started these informal sessions where we would just gather some young people from the village and I would just teach them English. And it grew. Literally, the first day we started, it was like 5 people that were related to me and like 3 of their friends. And then by the end of my time, so I was in Kurdistan for like 4 months by the end of it. By the end of it, it had grown to like 50 kids. It was crazy. Like so many different kids would show up. And it was inspirational because they didn't care that they weren't in a classroom. They didn't care that they didn't have proper resources. They just wanted to learn, and they'd ask all these fascinating questions. They would try really hard to pronounce English words. It was awesome. So I think, again, I was pretty young then, so that was one of the first experiences of doing, I suppose, volunteer work, and seeing how that made me feel, and I really enjoyed it. So the next couple of internships I did was the United Nations one in Kenya, where I worked in the housing and slum upgrading branch, and in particular I worked on projects in Kibera, which is the world's largest slum. That was... So when I applied for the United Nations, I got offered a number of internships. A few were in Western countries. So one was in Austria, one was in Geneva in Switzerland, and one was in Kenya. And I purposely selected Kenya because I thought this is going to be the most different to my normal everyday life. I live in New Zealand, it's very Western. If I go to Austria or Switzerland, yeah, the language is going to be different. There will be differences in culture, but not as different as Kenya would be. And so I specifically set out to challenge myself and put myself outside of my comfort zone. My parents weren't happy with that because they were like, why don't you just go somewhere safe like Geneva? It's so dangerous in Kenya, especially because this was straight after the Westgate Mall shootings, if you remember Nairobi, Kenya. So the political climate, was very unstable. There was...
especially for women as well.
Especially for a woman, and woman who is visibly different in that population. You stand out. And also the security threats, the security threats posed by terrorism at that time was severe. And I remember even when I was there were terrorist attacks often. There were bombs, grenades thrown into bars. So it was a pretty dangerous time to be there, but ultimately I chose Kenya because I wanted to have a real experience of working with people from parts of the world that had suffered in silence for too long, and people in parts of the world where justice and equality were really foreign concepts. They weren't, and that was going to be very different if I'd ended up in Geneva, my experience. So yeah. It was really, really life-changing, and the projects I worked on made a real impact to the people that lived in those slums. So I feel pretty proud to have done that.
Do you have any specific stories that really touched you?
Yeah. So this one project that I was working on in Kibera was a slum upgrade project, and so my job as working in the legal human rights team was to review projects and to assure compliance with human rights standards. And upon reviewing a particular proposal, I found what I thought to be a human rights violation. But being the youngest, most junior person in the team, I felt pretty uncomfortable raising it. I figured, I made up all these excuses about why I probably was wrong, not enough experience, too young, not smart enough, just all these excuses about why I was wrong. In the end, I talked about it with my supervisor, and I said to her that I thought that the placement of the toilets were a human rights violation. And most of our listeners might be wondering, why is the placement of a toilet a human rights violation? But in these slums, it's a critical issue because where you place the toilets in relation to where the women sleep at night dictates whether they're able to safely go toilet without risk of physical and sexual abuse on their walk there. And so when I advised on this particular project, it was just work. But when I visited Kibera, I saw the toilets, but more importantly, I saw the women who could use them safely. And it just put into perspective, this one project that was just me reviewing it on a computer, the impact of that and how far-fetching that is. So me just making some edits on a document, making some recommendations, then translated into this entire project where toilets were placed in a certain part of the slum, and then all these hundreds of women that I saw personally, and then it was kind of all just playing in my head, like, these are the women that can use these toilets. Like, it's real. It's not just something you're reviewing in a document. So that was a particular example that I felt really touched by, and I always think about, especially when young people ask me, how can you even make a difference? The world's problems are too big.
Yeah, a lot of people do ask that.
Yeah, and I think that's my example for it, because I was doing something very small, something that a lot of people could have done, just reviewing a document. That was my job too. I wasn't doing anything extra or special. But when you think about the effect the small action has on others, the ripple effect it has on their lives.
Yeah, you talk about like making ripples to change the world.
Yeah. And that's what I mean, because as one person, it can seem overwhelming, because there are so many problems in the world. There are so many issues in the world, and there are so many things that we may be passionate about and want to make a difference on, but we just simply don't know where to start. And my advice to anyone who wants to make a difference but is feeling overwhelmed by how big the world's problems are and where they can possibly make a difference, I would say it's starting small. You could do something small every day in everything that you do, and eventually that has ripple effects on other people's lives. So you may not even know, but you may have already done something that then went on to affect someone else's, life. And at times you don't even know that you're making this impact, but it's small things all the time that create these waves for people.
Yeah, that's quite powerful. I think, like, for our community, we started these English night classes for refugee adults, and the first time we went there, these guys, adults, they came to the class. Some of them are 65, 35, 45 years old, and these guys are really old, but they're so keen to learn, and you just see the excitement in their eyes, and you're just like, this is this is real cool. And like, I think, what your actions can do for other people, it just gives you that genuine fulfillment feeling that you could actually make an impact. Although it's not a large scale, but you could actually improve even if it's one person's life. I think that's quite meaningful.
And small ripples will end up being massive eventually. You don't have to see like a massive change instantly or the impact instantly. It's small things that I think eventually get there. Like the pieces of the puzzle may be very small, but when you put them all together, the bigger picture is extraordinary. And that's how I view just making a difference. I don't think any one person alone is capable of changing the world, but it's small things you do. You may influence someone else to do it too, and then all of a sudden there are now 2 of you doing small things, and then 3 of you doing small things, and then those small things become huge things. So yeah, I'm very optimistic about people being able to make a difference in that way.